Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining this next episode of In the Nick of Time. We're going to have a lot of fun today talking about supply chain risk and threats. Sounds a little scary, and it is, but we want to be prepared. We also want to take action and really pay attention to what matters. So we have a great guest today. CJ will join us to talk about all this. It's going to be a great discussion because he has a very diverse background and a lot of expertise in the subject. And with my time also at DHS, I got to see firsthand kind of the threats we're talking about and the state of our cyber posture that I call the ready kindergarten level when it comes to critical infrastructure. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Meanwhile, if you have not yet subscribed to the Nick of Time, please make sure you do that. Go to the learn in the nick of time.tv and subscribe so you can get notifications about our next guest. The next guest, actually, next Tuesday, 1 p.m., is going to be our dear friend Rob Slaughter, the founder and CEO of Defense Unicorns, also the former director of Platform One and Space Camp. So if you want to also have a good time, make sure you join next Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be a lot of fun. Meanwhile, also, if you've not paid attention, we have launched the learning platform, Learn with Nick, and it's accessible now also with a trial. So if you want to just test it out for 10 days free of charge, you can do that. We have a lot of great content, a lot of great videos. We're going to have a lot of guests, special guests that pretty famous people will come and do different master classes on the platform to be able to share their thoughts about architecture and zero trust and cyber and modeling and simulation and more. So if you want to learn and continuously invest in yourself, and we recommend you spend at least an hour a day to do that, to keep up and catch up with what's going on in IT. You want to try it out. We also have a private community in there. And more importantly, we have live Q&A sessions every 2 weeks. So it's going to be a lot of fun as well. You have 2 coupon codes if you want to try it out. The military and civilian U.S. government employees can use the coupon code 50% off, and also that applies to veterans as well. And then for everybody else, you can use the coupon code Let's Beat China with 20% off. So that's going to be also pretty interesting. We are releasing the next video also on digital twin, and we just released this week a video on the cloud native access point, the zero trust implementation of Platform One and the Air Force Space Force that was deployed in 45 days and can effectively bring zero trust from the edge to the cloud to any cloud environment, all the way to classified clouds as well. So take a look at it, and if you want to give us feedback on what to improve. And we're working on a pretty exciting partnership that will bring hands-on exercises, certifications with the Linux Foundation. And of course, we're going to have also created technical deep dives created by me, so you don't have to go through thousands of videos. That's kind of the issue with some of these platforms, right? You end up searching for something and you end up with so many different videos, and many times those videos are biased for one cloud provider or one product. And so we try to create that for you so you don't end up in a vendor lock-in situation. So we have so many telcos, banks, and healthcare companies, and of course, multiple governments, NATO and Five Eye partners, and the United States government as well on the platform. So check it out. All right. So without further ado, we're going to be talking today to CJ, and he's joining us ready from his deep background in supply chain risk management, and he's done so many different things. Today, he's a lead system engineer at the Space System Command of the Space Force. He has a master's degree in systems engineering from the Stevens Institute of Technology. He has 20 years of experience in many different fields, as you will see. It's kind of mind-boggling, kind of all the stuff he's been through. It's multiple different careers, effectively. A deep background in continuity of operations, and effectively what is kind of the continuity of government, right? And you will see that with his background in the Homeland Security space, and that gives you a pretty good insight of the supply chain risk as well. He spent 10 years as a technical staff in the Sandia National Laboratories, where he was the Critical Infrastructure Protection Program Manager for the New Mexico Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. He obviously has done a lot there to provide direction and coordination across government, private sector, and really coordinating the protection of the critical infrastructure and key resources during a crisis. He has worked in system management as a program manager and field engineer and service consultant as well. So as you can see, he's going to be able to give us a pretty good rundown of what kind of risks we need to think about when it comes to supply chain and when it comes to really critical infrastructure. Before that, he has served as a federal agent in the Department of Energy, National Nuclear Security Administration, and he was a Marine before that in an embassy. So that's a pretty unique also background there, handling the classified material security duties. So you're covering a pretty amazing breadth of expertise there. All right, so let's bring CJ on now.
Hello, Nick. How are you?
Hey, CJ, good to have you. We're so lucky. We're excited to be able to have that conversation with you. It's going to be a lot of great discussions. Effectively, you've done a massive amount of different jobs already that give you this kind of pretty unique insight. And when we prepared this show, I was obviously pretty excited because we could tell right away kind of the interest that the community would have to hear about all the stuff you're going to talk about today. But before we get started and start drilling you with questions, I'd like to first give you a chance to tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so the journey's been a pretty interesting one, to say the least. So starting off, like as you said, in the United States Marine Corps, spending some time overseas at the embassies as a MSG, they were called at the time, a Marine Security Guard, working towards being recruited out of the embassies to be a federal agent with the NNSA. And then getting into the private sector for a little while, utilizing the GI Bill for my undergrad, moving into customer service, and then critical infrastructure protection program management, which is where I really got interested in trying to figure out how all of this stuff worked. Because we were looking at most people are looking at the problem from one angle. One of the things that we had to do in emergency management is look at it from a multitude of different angles and a multitude of different systems that support the things that we do on a daily basis. So it was really neat to start learning from that how these things function and how these things work and how they fail, and how they're resilient and how they're not resilient. So looking at those things from a multitude of different perspectives is really, really critical. And just understanding how we get them to work, how we create resiliency. So there's a lot going on here. So we've got a lot of neat things to talk about. It took it a step further when I went to Sandia, working for an organization at Homeland, which I know you are familiar with, the National Infrastructure Simulation and Analysis Center at the time. So looking at how cascading consequences of systems failures across the 16 infrastructure sectors are really, really critical. So just figuring that out, working in a bunch of different other capacities while I was at Sandia over a 10.5-year period while I was there, and then being able to come on with the United States Space Force, figuring out some of the electronic issues around some of the infrastructure that we've had, and moving forward. So this is great to be able to share this data. And full disclosure here, Nick, everything that I'm going to be talking about today are of my opinion and do not represent the United States government, nor do they represent the United States Space Force.
Always important to have the legal spill before we get started. So that's good.
Absolutely.
With that, give us a little bit of information about that kind of unique experience you had, right? as the in a marine in an embassy as an embassy marine, I guess.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. So it's definitely a different life. You're basically the first people that anyone sees when they're coming in an embassy. You're behind bulletproof glass. You can lock down the entire embassy with one button. It's pretty straightforward, and we are the first line of defense. And the program has been in was started under President Roosevelt, and the Marines have guarded embassies ever since, 24/7, 365 at over 300 missions around the world.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. That must be kind of a pretty unique experience. What have you seen over there that was already kind of raising your awareness about the importance of being prepared and kind of paying attention to the continuity of operations that we have to deal with nowadays?
Yeah, so situational awareness is a huge thing, and one of the things that we learned while we were over there was just talking with our RSOs, our regional security officers, about the regional threat, and talking about who some of the bad actors were. Constant surveillance all the time, being aware of your surroundings, being trained in counterintelligence, knowing what to look for, particular tipping cues if you were being followed. It's just a multitude of different things on a multitude of different fronts. So there's a lot of real-time complexity in that equation, and understanding the infrastructure that supports everything that you do, from a operational, systems, human capital, cyber perspective. So all of those things are critically important, and just understanding if one of those things fails, it could be the difference between life and death, and that's a really important thing to highlight.
Yeah, no doubt. And so when you then moved to become a federal agent, right, for the Department of Energy and National Nuclear Security Administration, what did you get to see there, and what was kind of this unique perspective that you can bring to the discussion with this specific role as a federal agent?
Yeah, so that was a really interesting thing. So the organization was called the Office of Secure Transport, and that's about as much as I can talk about with regard to that. So some pretty important assets moving over our interstate highways covertly. It was understanding that the infrastructure that supported those operations was critically important too, from the highways to fuel to maintenance to personnel, to communications. All of those things were critically important in understanding, the protection of our country, among other things, and the movement of these secure assets from point A to point B for maintenance and such.
Yeah, that's a pretty unique role, no doubt. And so for that role, you had to become effectively a federal agent, right?
That's correct, sir. Yeah, we were sworn in. It was, if I remember correctly, it was an application pool of over 400 to a class of 19. So
Wow.
pretty big deal. So it was
Yeah.
pretty awesome at the time.
That's a pretty, that's a pretty small number of people that get picked for the job. That's pretty amazing. That's insane. So when you talk about kind of the enterprise ecosystem, right?
Mhm.
I know you mentioned to me that you're always thinking about the five pillars, right, of that
Yes.
enterprise ecosystem. Tell us a little bit about what those five pillars are about.
Absolutely. So I was alluding to it a little bit earlier. So we've got operations, infrastructure, systems, human capital, and cyber. And those are the five things, in my experience, that I have found are critically important to any enterprise infrastructure. I don't care if you're in the private sector. I don't care if you're in industry. I don't care if you're in government. Those five things drive the way in which we do business on a daily basis, kind of like a spider web. We can look at that in either a DevSecOps platform. We can look at that as an infrastructure platform, but it's a spider web, and everything is connected. The interesting thing about that connectivity, when one of those things fails, they ultimately all fail. And in emergency management and in the natural disaster business, the reason why most things fail internally and then they fail catastrophically is everything is connected. Your water, your infrastructure, your water wastewater services, your communications, your transportation. So Florida's gotten really good over the last 5 decades of hurricanes. So they know what works. They know that there are particular building codes. They know there's particular policy that drives those things, and they have become resilient around those things as a result of it, because it's all about training and repetition. So it's critically important that those things are considered in any enterprise, and how we go about working on them and going from there.
So, tell us a little bit more about what you see in terms of the state, right, of our critical infrastructure. I know when I was at DHS, I was the first thing I did, maybe after 2 weeks joining the department, was to go and buy a generator for my house because I felt like we were going to lose power pretty quick. And honestly, the cyber state of what I've seen was pretty despicable. I would argue, oftentimes the system's already compromised. They're just all deciding not to use it
Yeah.
in a malicious way. So what have you seen, and what do we need to pay attention to?
A lot of the things that we need to look about with regard to critical infrastructure involves personal resiliency, understanding that we have an incredibly fragile grid, understanding that our supply chain is a really important thing, and I believe COVID was a clear indicator of that. We had bare store shelves. We had some of the simple things. The toilet paper, the craziness that occurred in the mid 2000 or 2020 was another problem. The supply wasn't the problem, and they were talking about this on a number of different news outlets. The supply wasn't the problem; the distribution network was. So you have to look at the consumption rate of what they project out versus how they are going to get product on store shelves. So they have a particular mathematical formula that they deal with, and then once it is compounded or exceeded, that really changes the balance in the way goods and products and services are getting distributed. So the distribution network has to go back and kind of recalculate things. So always an important consideration with regard to infrastructure. So everything that we do in infrastructure is critically important to, there's somebody behind the scenes that has to figure all this out from a distribution supply chain perspective. And it's always important to consider that.
Yeah, no doubt. And so you've seen also kind of this massive adoption of just in time supply chain models, and obviously we've seen kind of the issues of not having any kind of stock can create anytime there's kind of this kind of event, whether it's national issue, COVID, or just a hurricane that you described before. That drastically impacts the ability to give access to resources to our citizens. And you've seen also the fact that for many years now, we've allowed China to become the main producer of many of these critical resources, including things as simple as penicillin, right? And it's kind of a disgrace that we're in a situation nowadays where we cannot actually make penicillin without China. How do
Yeah.
we make sure that we're going to be able to remain independent and not completely locked in, just like you see, Europe being dependent of Russia when it comes to energy. What are your thoughts on the just-in-time kind of supply chain model?
It's safe to say, and this may be a bold statement, that just in time is probably dead, based on what we've seen from a couple years ago. I believe distribution supply chains are going to become more regional, for the simple fact that accessibility is going to be a very important thing. The streams of supply chains, the last mile of distribution is critically important for any industry from a shipping perspective. But all of those things are interconnected. They're interdisciplinary, and it's complex systems architecture, to be quite frank. And a lot of folks don't really think about the sausage making behind the scenes. They just want to eat the sausage. So that's really important to consider the things that we do that impact the other things that we do. And all of that is infrastructure related or systems related. And if we don't look at it from that systems thinking perspective, the folks who are, C-suite folks, CTOs, CIOs, COOs, we have to think differently about this problem, and we have to highlight the fact that everything is connected to everything in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and the dependencies we have. I remember we did an exercise at DHS back when I was there, and we realized that if we were to lose the grid and were to lose it for a foreseeable period of time with no end in sight to recover the grid, we would see people starting killing each other after 10 days. So really, kind of the dependencies and the fact that the entire United States, effectively, nation and companies and small businesses and government is so dependent on the grid is sometimes taken for granted, right? And you've seen many times where there's disruption. We've seen the recent colonial pipeline hack, right? That targeted the oil pipeline. Funny enough, most people don't realize this only targeted the billing system of the pipeline, and the pipeline company decided to shut down the pipeline because they couldn't bill the customers, and so
Right.
that impacted drastically the access to gasoline on the East Coast, to the point that people were starting to freak out for 5 6 days. And of course,
Yeah.
when he came back up, everybody moves on. What do you think about the fact that people seem to over always agree, right, that we need to do better, and that we need to pay attention to these issues, and particularly when there is a crisis, I think people can feel the pain to some degree of what's happening, but then the minute everything goes back to normal, I guess everybody moves on and no one talks about it anymore. I just feel like this kind of complacency and just putting our head in the sand is kind of a recipe for disaster. What are your thoughts there?
Like I was saying earlier, the German philosopher Hegel said it best: we learn from history that we don't learn from history. So we have these repetitive cycles over and over again where we're trying to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. And that's a pure definition of insanity last time I checked. So it's hard that we do these tabletop exercises, we look at some of these problems, but are they lessons observed or are they lessons learned? So that's a critical question we have to ask ourselves, to the folks that are performing these exercises and proctoring these exercises, to look at some of these vulnerability points that are really critical in understanding the how, the what, and the why of a disaster, or looking at the things that drive the other things. And that's critical infrastructure. And it's being resilient to those things and being able to understand these are not trivial problems by any stretch of the imagination. So we've got a lot of work to do, and interagency work to do, to try to figure these things out. But cyber now is really at the forefront of a lot of these things. And there are cyber systems that are very, very vulnerable to the way in which these systems operate, because we really can't do anything without those two major things, and that's power and that's cyber. So, really important points that we've got to hit home here to our decision makers and our leaders.
Yeah, a lot of people say there needs to be this massive Pearl Harbor moment of with cyber that would possibly kill people to more degree, for people to wake up. I hope that's not going to be the case, and I hope that's not going to be what it takes for people to wake up. But I always find it surprising, right, that we all seem to agree that we need to do better, but yet everybody moves on with their daily lives, right? Anytime there's an issue like this, after this happened, and I, like you said, I don't feel like the lessons learned are really taken into tangible actions, and so that's a concerning thing for me. And when you look at the breadth of critical infrastructure, right? What sector would you say is the weakest? Are we talking grid, water? Obviously, I feel like healthcare companies are doing a little bit of a better job taking some proactive actions when it comes to cybersecurity. Although there's still tremendous issues with IoT devices and legacy devices getting connected to the internet and stuff like that. But what do you feel like is happening on the other side of the critical infrastructure markets?
Probably the fragility of the grid would be first, and then cyber would be second, because one is ultimately interdependent on the other. So it's
Right.
critically important that we look at those things and look at the resiliency or the lack of resiliency in particular systems that are going to cause cascading consequences of systems failures across the board. Because I believe a lot of these folks have been looking at it as a single event. They're not looking at it under a holistic umbrella, which needs to occur. And yes, that's complicated, and yes, that's complex, but that's how these systems propagate or fail. And everything that they're connected to is going to fail as well. And it's literally like a gigantic snowball that's turning into a boulder as it's rolling down the mountain, ready to take you out. So we've seen it time and time again. There's hundreds of case studies around floods, fires, hurricanes, tsunamis. What happened in Japan regarding the tsunami about what was it, 2012, I believe, timeframe. the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant and the issues that caused. The implications were far-fetching, and the supply chains were wholly impacted as a result of it. So it's everywhere. It's a worldwide thing because of the interconnectivity.
Yeah, and you see some exercises at FEMA. I remember we had kind of dual exercises, right? Where maybe there was a catastrophe, maybe a hurricane, and then maybe a malicious actor or nation would go after 911 communication systems, which are also in a despicable state, right? There's so many attacks in terms of flooding and ability to disrupt the 911 communication system. It's pretty mind-boggling sometimes that despite systems sometimes being impacted for hours, literally causing death because people cannot reach out to 911 and get help.
Right.
Yet we see very little being done on the 911 side. There's tremendous funding, right, that goes to the state and local departments, and you've seen FEMA, give all these grants for years, but yet often what you end up seeing is the state and local communities spending the money on something else, which is pretty mind-boggling. So I guess that's kind of the use case you're talking about, also, right? Where we don't always think about, hey, we're just doing an exercise on just one thing going wrong, but then effectively the whole set of other things unravel, and you end up in a pretty precarious situation. And most people don't have the ability to emulate that kind of scenario, and that's where maybe a digital twin or ability to do these kind of emulations would bring a lot of value, right?
I think the strategic investments that have been made for years. We've bought more equipment than we could possibly know what to do with. I mean, we need to stop focusing on shiny things, and we need to start focusing on systems and capabilities. The capabilities are going to lead us down the path of a foundational, more holistic understanding of how the system operates, why it's critically important that we do these things, who it impacts, and looking at the resiliency being created in these communities, because I believe that's critically important. There's a really interesting case study that we had. We were supporting Governor Christie's chief of staff 3 days after Hurricane Sandy, and we were talking about some of the failures that they had because people couldn't get fuel to power their generators. So we were able to call up FSISAC, and the Financial Services Information and Analysis Center, and say, look, there were a couple of vice presidents of MasterCard and Visa that we touched base with, and they wanted to get back online because their per credit card transaction was really pretty critical. But understanding the systems that were behind these things that drove those transactions was critically important. And DHS was asking us, well, what's going on here? I said, well, there's a couple of things that we need to figure out real quick. If you're getting a credit card transaction, number one, you've got electricity. Number two, you're able to pump fuel. So they were rationing anywhere between 5 and 20 gallons per individual. We were able to check that out and just say, look, these folks are being able to pump fuel. So as a result of that, they have power, and they're running through the lines. And DHS was like, that's brilliant. It's like, well, no, that's operations, and it's critically important that these things are understood from a policy standpoint and a decision standpoint. So those are the things that drive other decisions that kind of take you down that rabbit hole. But when you're talking about people's lives, and you're talking about the way in which people deal with that type of adversity, it's very critical to frame the problem to a decision maker who has to make a decision in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Time is always of the essence, and often what you see is people rushing to make decisions because of lack of preparedness, right? And despite FEMA having this massive preparedness, division of FEMA, what I've seen is very little being done when it comes to cybersecurity. I think the bulk of the expertise in FEMA is still lagging behind when it comes to understanding cyber threats. What do you think on the cyber side of these things?
I think you're right on target, Nick. I think a lot of the folks that are in charge of these organizations were brought up where cyber really wasn't a major consideration. And I think the bigger problem here is we have to get back to basics in a re-education of how these systems functions, how things have changed in the last 15 to 20 years, where cyber is kind of the foundational basis for our physical world. And there isn't much that we can't do without electricity and cyber, because we've got the IoT, right, the Internet of Things, and we've got everything connected from that perspective. So when those things start failing, they start failing across the board. Internet, ISP providers, VoIP, voice over IP, they're all connected to the internet by means of fiber optics. And when those systems start failing, the rest of the system starts failing too. So considerations need to be made, and the problem needs to be looked at from a systems thinking perspective.
Yeah. And in fact, when you look at your expertise, of course, you have a pretty deep expertise when it comes to incident response. What's missing there that we need to improve?
One of the things that our first responders are taught how to do is respond. They're not necessarily taught about the other systems failures. So when I was at the Department of Homeland Security in the Office of Emergency Management for New Mexico, we had people that wanted to respond to the event. The bigger problem that we're dealing with here is we have a lot of folks that don't understand the things that support the things that they do, personally, professionally, industrial wise. And when you have some of those cascading failures across the board, the way in which you respond to an incident it could be different, and it's all geographically based as well. So what might be going on in the northeastern quadrant of the United States may be significantly different than what's going on in the southeastern quadrant of the United States, or the Midwest, or the northwestern, or the southwestern part of the United States, or middle America for that matter. So all of those things, one size does not fit all when it comes to FEMA, one size fits some. And we have to get our leaders to think differently about the geographic issues that we face in that particular area, and why those things are important, and who they impact, and what the infrastructure is or is not. So perfect example, when you've got a heavily forested area that's inundated by trees, well, what's the quickest path to get from point A to point B? Well, the road. Well, what if the road is blocked by down power lines and trees? Well, the emergency services aren't going to get there, so you have to go to potential aerial assault to extract those people out of a very dangerous situation. So those are things that need to be considered that aren't really considered until it's right in front of them. And, coming back to the Marine Corps, train as you fight, right? So if you're not considering these things when you're doing a tabletop, you're not only selling yourself short, you're potentially costing you and the people that you're working with lives and thinking about the problem.
Yeah, no doubt. What do you say? What do you see when it comes to state and the federal side? Do you see states now kind of taking the lead when it comes to incident response, and how do you see the support provided by the federal government to the states responding? Do you feel like they're stepping up the game? Are they really bringing value? Is it just money? Is it people? Is it National Guard also taking some kind of tremendous level of action to save people's lives? What does it take to succeed in a disaster like what you've seen?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing here is just a foundational understanding of the things that are critically important to support the things that you do. So training is critically important. Situational awareness is absolutely critically important. People that drive the policy, who really need to foundationally understand the HSAs, the Homeland Security advisors, the police chiefs, the fire chiefs, because every incident, as you know, starts at the state and local level. And we out here in New Mexico had a really, really big fire, the Calf Canyon fire, and that was 380,000 acres. And when you start talking about resources, we literally had every aerial firefighting asset in the country in New Mexico this year. So again, these are important topics. From a resourcing perspective, they need to be considered, but there's a lot of other things that need to be considered in that equation. There were close to 5,000 firefighters up in Calf Canyon. So you're literally setting up a little city. These folks have got to eat. They've got to sleep. They're doing shift work. These are all considerations that need to be made at the state, local, and federal level. Where's all this fuel coming from? Who is supporting ops? Who has incident command? So these are really critical things to consider across the board, but that's all logistics and supply chain stuff that they've gotten really, really good at over the years. But the problem is we had a really big fire in New Mexico. What happened if something broke out in another state? All of those assets would either have to continue to fight that fire, or we're going to have to consider a happy balance here. So leaders need to consider that as well.
Yeah, because often what we see is, a lot of other states helping neighborhood state, right? And so what you're saying is, if there was to be multiple incidents at the same time, particularly in a grid incident, right, where effectively it could be a cascading effect, or an attack, right? That could be a different story, because now you have to focus on yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's I don't know what kind of tabletop exercises we've seen being conducted when it comes to that kind of breadth of complexity of use cases. I doubt there's much going on. Often what you've seen is pretty basic things. They do a great job with very little resources, no doubt. And it's pretty amazing people that, like you said, are willing to put their lives in danger and go respond to an event, often sleeping in very interesting interesting is a word, conditions, and with very limited access to normal facilities. And so that's I remember when I was at DHS and with FEMA, a lot of people would be called to go on site and respond to events, and it's pretty scary stuff. It's not just going to work in some type of cushy office, or even more staying home like we do now, and on Zoom, right? So
right.
Pretty amazing stuff that those people do. They don't have the luxury of saying, "Oh, I want to be remote." That's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah.
that's different stuff.
I don't think fighting a fire remotely is in the cards yet, but one of these days in the
One day we
future,
may have robots,
could.
and you're gonna have the firefighter with with the controls at home on the couch, But until then, I
Absolutely.
think it's going to be different. So
No doubt.
let's take a look a little bit about your thoughts, right, when it comes to the supply chain risks. What keeps you up at night? What are we doing right, and what are we also doing wrong?
Yeah, so interesting point. So I think highlighting all of the major ports in the United States right now and how they are all backlogged at some level. We've got a multitude of different strings to pull on when it comes to that. There's hundreds of ships outside the port of Los Angeles, the port of LA, the port of Seattle, the port of Savannah. So, and these ships are just waiting to offload their product. I think the bigger problem, that we're seeing from the supply chain perspective, that is in and of itself a complex system. One of the things that concerns me is the foundational lack of understanding from the C-suite folks as to how these complexities and how these existential things on the outside are driving the way in which some other problems. So when you're talking about intermodal, right, you're talking about boat, you're talking about truck, you're talking about train. If any one of those pieces of infrastructure is either compromised from a cyber perspective or just a lack of access perspective, you've got human capital in that equation. There's so many different things that we can talk about just in that domain space, Nick. That is one of the things that keeps me up, because without supply, you have this fine balance of a supply demand construct on a daily basis. But without the ability to go to an ATM or get cash or do electronic transactions or electronic transfers, you're going to run into some problems. I remember a conversation about a Walmart executive probably about 10 years ago, and they lost access to all of their Visa and MasterCard transactions for, I think it was 36 hours. And when you're talking about a single store that does $1 million an hour in sales, you can imagine why they were very, very eager to get back online and start swiping those cards and getting those transactions processed.
Yeah, that's a pretty important revenue right there with one store. You wonder how much money
Absolutely.
they end up making
Well,
in that
and
store.
there's 7,000 Walmart stores, so now you're starting to talk about some scaling here, which is also critically important. So again, a lot of people don't necessarily consider all of the stuff that supports them on the back end until it actually impacts them. So I believe that's a critically important thing to consider. But I don't think enough of these conversations are being had, Nick. And I'm sure in your experience, and I know in mine, I have not seen that at the level it should be being done.
Yeah, there's kind of this complacency, right? It's not gonna happen, or let's wait until it does, right? And some people even look at numbers and say, hey, well, investing proactively is a pretty big expense, but maybe we just wait and see what happens, and hopefully it's going to be less money. And oh, by the way, we have insurance, right? So we should be fine. It's not
Well,
that
and then
simple.
yeah, and to your point, the insurance and the parametric reinsurance folks also have to consider how are they able to qualify and quantify their risk as well. So you have to be able to buy that down on a level that's critically important. But if you don't even understand what your risk is, you can't create resiliency in that system that tells the people that you're insuring, thou shalt do this. If you do not, you will not be insured. So that's also a critically important from the Aons, the Cargills, the Archer Daniel Midlands, those types of folks who are able to qualify and quantify that risk. Um, it's really important because if there are folks that aren't going to get insured, they have to absorb that cost. So as you know, that's a pretty hefty bill to pay.
Yeah, and what's interesting also is people just assume the getting an insurance is good enough, but they forget to read the fine prints. If you look at cyber insurance, for example, it's very clear that you have to have the right controls in place and the right investments and the right teams in place to protect your systems and due diligence. And if you fail at any of this stuff, the first thing they're going to try to do is to get away with writing you a check, right? So we've seen dozens of insurance actually not only not pay their customers' claims, but more importantly, recently even sue them for the lack of due diligence. So literally, the insurance company suing the customer for failing, doing what they were supposed to be doing according to the contract. So that's that's kind of becomes a liability now.
It does, and looking at those B2B type of transactions, because you have the reinsurance industry that's supporting that business. But when you're talking about a critical asset under the umbrella of a piece of critical infrastructure, the cascading failures can be even more dire, and there can be even greater consequences in that particular domain space as it applies to the who, the what, and the why with regard to those failures, because it could take weeks or months to get that organization back up online. However, if you figured some resiliency into that equation, your timeline to which you need to reconstitute is going to be that much less because of the resiliency that you created. But I see resiliency as a buzzword and not really a foundationally understood action as to how you go about addressing these types of things. So we need to think differently about that problem as well, because they're all out there and they're in plain sight. But it's the understanding of how the action reaction, the if then response to that thing is going to impact business or industry.
Hey, it's interesting, right? You also see a lot of companies moving to the cloud, and then they seem to forget that the cloud is just a data center of somebody else, and many times they have no backup, or if they do have
Right.
backups, the backup is in the same cloud,
Right.
and often with no cold storage or access to a backup plan of the backup, and
Right.
that's a pretty concerning thing. What I've seen also is companies recently having some of their suppliers that were building their website get upset because they decided to end the contract, that they literally go and delete all of the database content, and they had no backup of it. And so keeping up with your need to know and access control, and more importantly reminding everybody that they should have a proper backup outside of one location, because even cloud providers, I was reading again this morning, Azure was down. I don't know if it was worldwide, or if at least it was a very significant downtime for European companies, and many people are complaining about it. And that reminds everybody that, hey, none of this stuff is magical.
Right. And to your point, Nick, with regard to some of these data centers, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? So it's up to the organization to consider your cyber posture, right? So where are your backups? Where are your UPSs? If you are under the assumption that data center is going to be able to keep your data under that umbrella underneath a power failure, you're kidding yourself. And you're under some false pretenses that, oh, they're always going to have my data. They're only as strong as their weakest link. So it's critically important that homework is done and capabilities are understood for that particular data center that is protecting your data. Because if their infrastructure fails, guess what? Your data is no longer accessible. So that's another problem as well.
Yeah, in fact, the company I was mentioning to you that got this database deleted literally lost its entire business for literally maybe up to a month and a half. They
Wow.
rebuilt the database from scratch. There's zero backup. They had to use staging environment data that they were keeping on the side for development purposes, just try to put stuff back together. But they lost a lot of information from the customers, and it's just it's pretty interesting to see, the kind of the convenience that cloud providers and different SaaS services bring to the table. But then people forget that at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to be held responsible, or at least fitting the impact of a breach or just of downtime. So, Chris was mentioning on the chat, the mean time to failure. I actually recorded a video on Learn with Nick about the Dora metrics, right? And the importance of tracking mean time to production, mean time to recovery, right, and all these things. And you still find people not realize kind of the complexity of uptime. Everybody is kind of getting used to the three 5 nines of downtime of uptime, and all these cloud providers often keeping up with those SLAs, but it's not easy, right? It's a pretty massive lift for a small organization to try to keep up with that. And so I'll put the link on the chat here for people that want to check the Dora metrics, what it takes to really have the kind of velocity and baked-in security to be able to get the telemetry you need to continuously reinvent yourself and move at the pace of relevance.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Nick, it's really critical because I believe the shipping line Masaryk, I think is the name of the company. They were under a cyber attack. I think it was about a year ago, and the only reason that they were able to reconstitute is because the port in Lagos had a power outage. So as a result, they were able to electronically reconstitute their manifest as a result to get everything back online, because all of these shipping companies have electronic manifests now. They're not paper directed. So it's pretty interesting to see that and knowing that is a potential cyber vulnerability across the board. So when you're talking about cloud systems, when you're talking about infrastructure, all of those things have to get supported by something. And when you're talking about the way in which those 40,000 Connex container ships are stacked, every one of those is marked and has an RFID tag attached to it. So everybody knows what is on that particular level and what order it needs to be taken off the boat. So if you don't have that, you're dead in the water and you have to go do all of that by hand. So another important point of consideration as to why cyber is critically important in this equation.
And that's why the tracking and telemetry, right, of all these IoT devices are so important to be able to have the right insight in terms of what's going on, getting the visibility of downtime, or even like sometimes we've seen a proactive maintenance on aircraft, right? The ability to say, hey, this capability here, or this sensor, or this device is not performing the way it should, or it's starting to show sign of fatigue, and so you see a proactive replacement of those sensors or devices or components through that telemetry, right? So having access to that kind of visibility, and that's where we struggle, right, in the government, because we have so many silos within silos, and so even if we add the information, it's not in a central place. So we have a holistic view and 360-degree understanding of what's going on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Einstein said it best: we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that we used when we created them. And he was that's still on spot on to this day. So we had a particular way in which we thought about the problem, but maybe we've got to think about the problem differently now as a result of some of that new thinking or some of the technology that's driving the way in which we do stuff. Because as you know, complexity on top of complexity equals a vulnerability. And we have a lot of those in a multitude of different systems right now because of the lack of the depth of thinking about this problem.
And so you obviously with COVID, right? That I feel like a lot of people started to realize kind of the importance of all the stuff we talked about today, right? I was a prepper myself before COVID, probably because of my time at DHS. Honestly, I don't think I was concerned at all before I got to see what's going on with the grid and
Right.
water and all that stuff, right? I think I was, just like everybody else, kind of living my life and thinking, that the government was doing what they're supposed to be doing to make sure that all this stuff keeps on happening behind the scene. And I realized, well, that's not that simple. And if you compare, with countries like France, right, the grid in the United States is comprised of hundreds of companies, and obviously, if you want to go and help those guys to improve their cyber posture or improve whatever management process or remove bottlenecks or whatever issue you're facing, it's pretty difficult when you have to deal with hundreds of companies, small, big, companies having to deal with all that breadth of people.
Absolutely.
When you look at kind of what happened with COVID, right? What would you recommend people to do to make sure you know their house and their family is where they should be? What kind of basic um, you know things they need to think about outside
Yeah.
of the basics, right? But really, like water. I went way out of control, but just regular people, I guess. What do they
Right.
want to? What do they want to
Well,
do?
yeah, some type of some a gravity fed water filtration system. I
Yeah, so
practice
you
what I
can catch
preach.
the rain.
Yeah, a water filtration system that I have. I've
Although
got a
many
couple.
many of the people listening might be in cities, so it's a little bit harder too, right? But that's okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's this one is sitting on my kitchen countertop, so it's got some
Oh,
filters
there we
on it.
go.
It's good. It's good. It's called the Berkey water filter. I'm not trying to plug them, but they're a great little unit, kinetically
Yep.
fed through gravity. Good stuff. So,
And how much
um,
water are we talking about, right? I think it's quite, people don't realize it's a lot of water that we need for even a few days of
it absolutely
disaster,
is.
right?
Yeah, it's a couple hundred gallons. You figure at least. I think it's like 5 to 10 gallons per person per day. So it
Yeah,
adds
I
up
think
very,
to
very.
to to wash yourself and stuff, right? If
Yeah,
you want to go
yeah,
beyond just the basics of
yeah,
drinking and stuff,
absolutely.
you probably want to have
So
5 to 10 gallon per person per day, right?
yeah, a bunch of non-perishables. I'm thinking at least 2 weeks worth of stuff that you have because you just don't know. You don't know at what level the supply chain is going to be impacted. You have no idea, if the government is going to be able to get things together and figure things
I mean,
out.
clearly COVID, you could tell, right? The first 2 months really were a problem. So I would say
Yeah,
probably a month, right? Yeah.
yeah, a month's worth. Yeah, depending on the posture. If you're a prepper, I mean, obviously you've got a root cellar and you've got all this other stuff, standing by, ready to go. So there's something to be said for that too. But there was a point in time where a lot of folks thought those people were crazy until it
Yeah.
happened, and they're like,
Until
"Whoa, okay,
people thought I was crazy. So I mean, they still do, by the way. They still do. But the food, right? They would get normal, food they eat, right? So they can rotate and not just don't buy just this MRE food that you're never gonna eat. I mean, you can
oh
have
yeah,
some of it if you want to have it, right? But having canned food and just food that you're gonna eat and go through and just
absolutely."
rotate, so it doesn't become like
Yep.
this expense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And canned foods are the best route to go as long as you've got a heat source that still works. We have a gas stove in our house, so we don't have to worry about the electricity part. So if that ever happens, but we've got Plan B. We've got a couple of camp stoves that we can work through on that one as well. So yeah, great stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, just be prepared. The common sense stuff like the
And
beans,
toilet
the rice.
paper.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
you know,
toilet paper. Right. Absolutely.
yeah.
Can't forget
Everybody
about that.
needs toilet paper. Uh, that's where the French, created a bidet, right? So the
Yes,
bidet is supposed to be the
yes,
answer to that, right?
yes.
So
Problem
you
solved.
can't run out of toilet paper. Problem solved. I honestly, it's funny because I've yet to see a French guy use one ever. So I don't know. It's kind of it was in rooms. It's true, right? I would say in bathrooms, but I've yet to see anyone use one. But
Okay.
not that I would want to see it anyways. But anyway,
That's funny.
yeah, that was funny. So obviously, this stuff has been keeping me up at night. Oh, of course, a generator could be good, right? Solar, maybe, having a battery bank. They have these solar things now, right? That is, small bank, 1,000 watt, 2,000 watt, even sometimes, right? Of course, if you have a house or if you have a garden, whatever, you could have an actual propane slash gas, generator, right? Dual
Mhm.
stuff. It's always good,
Yeah, dual
right?
use.
It's
Yeah,
always the
absolutely.
first thing I run out of, in the store, right? People run to buy generators, right? But the fact is, if you want to have power, right, the easiest way to get it back quick, right? And of course, you don't start rigging it into the house and creating a mess. Don't do that. Just
Yeah.
don't mess it up. People create fires and
Well,
electrocute themselves, right? So
yeah, and to your point, Nick, you can have a great generator, but you're kind of stuck if you run out of fuel. So, I mean, that's another important
yeah.
consideration as well. So, you got to consider the fuel consumption rates, and a lot of these new generators have an app connected to them that just talks about how
Hmm.
much fuel per hour you're burning and what you're able to plug into it. So, I mean, all of the data analytics are being done for you by means of an app, which is awesome. So
Yeah. That's
that
why I
that
like
never.
propane too. I have a 2,000 propane tank buried in the yard, so you can connect to that too, and then you have propane and gas. You have options.
Absolutely.
Always
Yeah,
having options in life, right? It's always better than not having options, right?
better. Yeah, better to have too many options than not enough, right, Nick?
Yeah, right. So let's see. A lot of people asking a lot of questions, so I'm trying to
Okay.
keep up with both while making funny jokes about bidet. And CBI was talking about the water is needed for bidet, yeah, but you don't need toilet paper, right? That's kind of the point
Right.
of the
Yep.
other. Of course, you
Absolutely.
still need water. That's kind of the problem. Of course, here I have a well, so it's good, but you never know. With well, I probably have a good 500 gallon of water. You have these stackable bread 50-gallon tanks, right? And you can stack them, and then you can put a little bit of product in it so the water doesn't turn bad. Whatever. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's just so much work. It's just, but I mean, you never know, right? So I have it. So all right, so let's take a look at the Department of Defense a little bit, right? We talked a lot about more broader situations here, but when it comes to DoD, right, and you compare it to what you see on the commercial side, how are we doing? Both when it comes to preparedness and when it comes to kind of complacency, when it comes to also maybe even kind of the actual state of what's unclassified. We can talk about, of course, here
Yeah.
of
Absolutely.
the risk.
So I think you've seen it about as much as I have, Nick, and I think there's a significant disconnect between Silicon Valley and the DoD because Silicon Valley is motivated by uh, profit. The federal government is not. So it's pretty interesting to take a look at this and go, okay, we've got some concerns we need to deal with, but I feel like from a personal perspective that Silicon Valley is doing like 140 or 150 miles an hour, and DoD is maybe doing 65 or 70. I don't know
You're
if we have
generous.
what was that?
You're being generous, but yeah,
Well, I'm trying to be diplomatic as well. So, um,
yeah,
but I
I
think
would cut it in half, but that's okay.
okay, all right. You
I'll do
said
it.
it, I
I'll be
didn't.
the bad guy for you. You'll be the good guy. Here we go.
Yeah, you said it, I didn't. So it's interesting because we've got folks in Silicon Valley that are innovating. They're doing things at the speed of technology. I don't know if we have enough folks in the DoD that really understand the complexities of the problems that we're trying to address. Number one, looking at it from a systems perspective and looking at the way in which these problems are propagating. So it's probably safe to say that 20th century policy is precluding or driving 21st century innovation. So the policies that we are creating or have created are not keeping up with the pace of technology as technology is propagating. So I'm sure you've seen that in your capacity. I know I've seen it in mine, but it's very difficult when you're trying when you have an adversary that is moving a lot faster than you are, and you're precluded by red tape and layers of bureaucracy. And we were talking about this earlier. If you couldn't fix it at your level, what is the reasonable expectation as an engineer for me being able to fix it at mine? So I think those are
Yeah.
important things to highlight as well.
And what's concerning too, right, is that at first people thought I was just a crazy French guy, right? Although I'm American, French American, I guess, whatever they want to call me. But the fact is, you've seen a lot of people coming out of the government with the same kind of, you know, the same push of awareness and kind of raising the alarm when it comes to that complacency. You've seen it even recently, right? The DIU director Michael Brown leave as well, and mentioning also the same issues he was facing. It's always telling, right, when you see both the Digital Defense Service (DDS) and DIU that used to be direct report to SecDef, now moved, one under the Chief Digital AI Office, and one moved under the OSD Research and Engineering Undersecretary, and that tells you usually kind of they lose a little bit of the sway, right, and the almighty kind of branding and marketing that they used to have. I wonder sometimes is it because they failed to deliver meaningful outcomes, and then it's just like, well, that's what you get. I can tell you the new DDS director, she's awesome, right? I love her a lot. She's a great person, but Katie. But I can tell you the previous ones were focused on waivers and kind of short-term gain. I mean, one of them literally told me the biggest achievement they've done was Jedi, which effectively never came to life. So if that's your biggest achievement, we're in trouble. But so there is also the fear, right, that some people are starting to say, well, maybe it's not achievable. There was a great article, I think, yesterday or 2 days ago, I think by Breaking Defense or somebody like that, about the Michael Brown DAU director, saying that it was an open, saying that effectively DAU was doomed from the get-go. I don't know if that's true or not. What I know is, they fail at scaling, what they're supposed to be doing, and maybe that's part of the problem. And then people start saying, well, see, you couldn't even succeed anyway. So now it's the expectation is to fail. People go in without even trying, anymore, because they're already convinced. I remember when I started pushing the first zero trust implementation, that would be, the cloud native access point bypassing the internet access point in DoD. People told me, well, you're wasting your time. It's never going to happen. And, it's never been done before. And I was like, I don't care. I'm going to try to do it anyways. And in 45 days, we had it, right? And people were just like shocked, right, that it was even feasible. But what I found is, when you go in all full speed and you have momentum, very few bureaucrats are going to put their neck in the middle of the way to slow you down, because they know there is momentum going and they don't want to risk it too, so that's actually pretty interesting to see that, it goes both ways. The issue, of course, is not everybody was as lucky as me to to have made money before the government to not care and to do whatever I wanted to do anyways. But that's the kind of people maybe we need in the leadership position, right? Instead of all these people with so many conflict of interest. If you see some of the appointees nowadays, they cannot even get involved in many of the engagements because they have so many previous relationships, or their wives or whatever, and they can get involved in very meaningful, important engagements. I know a very critical appointee in the Air Force that has 40% effectively of all engagement that he cannot even get close to, or touch in any way, shape, or form. 40% is a pretty big number, so, and that's the beauty with people like me, right? When we come from the commercial side, but then again, the system is not designed to enable people like us, the clearance, right? All this stuff. And you've seen actually with DAU, right? They've made again the mistake of not making the DAU director for the first time an HUE, which would enable people to just bring someone in and not have all the bureaucracy and paperwork, but instead they went with a traditional apply for a job at USA job nonsense, right? Like they're gonna find a CEO, from a Fortune 500, be like, I'm gonna do my SES ECQ, and spend 5 months on it to get a job that's gonna be a 90% pay cut. It makes a lot of sense. You wonder sometimes if it's an accident, if it's incompetence, if it's on purpose, but what's for sure is China is not waiting for us to figure this out, right? So when you look at China and you compare with, we talked about kind of the velocity and the difference between commercial and DoD. What's your take, between DoD and China?
I think they are moving significantly faster than we are right now. And per capita, academically, they are putting out more PhDs per capita than the United States by a measure, I believe, of probably 10 to 1. And that's scary, because when you're talking about the future of national security, the future of being able to address some of these problems on a micro and a macro scale, we need folks that are trained in STEM, that are trained on a number of different fronts to be able to deal with these problems from a forensic standpoint, from a systems perspective, from a distribution supply chain perspective. We don't have the STEM talent right now, and we're trying to play catch up. But these are things that should have been considered 10, 15, potentially 20 years ago. One of the difficult things is if you've got young children who are interested in STEM, by all means, can continue to support that effort, because I can tell you right now, if we don't, what's the word I'm looking? If we don't support the next generation, we're going to be in a lot of trouble, Nick.
Yeah, and look, I think it's also important to realize that China has about 120 science and technology graduates. That's a third of the United States. That's a big number. And look, I'm all about different degrees and everybody doing whatever they want to do. But the fact also is we have to be realistic. If the answer is going to be, hey, as a student, I can pick whatever degree I want to pick, despite knowing that there is no job at the end of it. And I love this stuff, but I know I'm not going to get a job. I'm going to end up probably at McDonald's and having to pay now 100,000, student loan, and then hope for Biden to come and write you a check to pay it off for you. That's probably not a great story, right? I think what would be a little bit better is to tell people, look, at the end of the day, this is not a kumbaya world, right? We need to, produce, and we need to bring value to the world, and for that, you need to find a degree and get a degree if you need a degree, which I would argue you don't always need, right? I don't have a degree myself, but I agree with people that want to have a degree. That's not a big deal, but at least get a degree into something that can get you a job that's going to enable you to pay at least the student loans,
Yeah.
if not at least live a great life. Otherwise, why are you doing it to begin with, right? And it's kind of funny how also in the United States we started to tell people, if you don't get a degree and you become a plumber, or you become a welder, you're a failure in the universe. And it's just complete nonsense, right? We need those people. We have such a lack of talent that you can't even build houses or do anything because you can't find anyone qualified unless you want to get scammed or pay 10 times the cost. It's just, do people realize kind of the dependency also on the talent? We talked a lot about critical infrastructure and stuff, but we didn't really talk about people.
Yeah. The human capital side of things, right? So you're absolutely right. The trades are absolutely critical. The mechanics, the fixers, the electricians, the pipe fitters, the plumbers, the guys who are responsible for building the infrastructure, right? I mean, when you look at the turn of the last century, we had a lot of stuff going on with regard to the things that were getting built. And a lot of that infrastructure is still here. It still exists because it was built with quality. It was built with quality materials. But that infrastructure is aging and it needs to be updated. There has to be some type of maintenance cycle, this operations and maintenance cycle that we need to consider that has largely been neglected. So I believe it's critically important that we need to consider from a decision point why these things are important, who do they impact, and just looking at the bridges across the United States. A lot of the bridges, according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, are deficient. They're falling apart. They need to be either repaired or replaced. So those are important things for consideration, because without bridges, we don't have transportation. We can't get from point A to point B. There's other critical pieces of infrastructure that need to be considered as well. So there's a lot going on there that we can, a lot of layers to that onion we can peel back, Nick. But I'm pretty confident we need to start thinking more deeply about these problems and how they impact our daily lives, and who are the people and what type of funding streams that we have. Because quite frankly, 85% or more of the critical infrastructure is in the private sector in the United States.
Yeah, and I apologize. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but there's a massive storm here. So I guess
Okay.
the good news, I have 7 generators, so you're gonna be good when it comes to to power.
There you
But
go.
the noise is just insane. It's
It's
actually
impressive.
a pretty insane storm. But so I don't know if you can hear it, but anyway.
Yep.
So the question I wanted to ask you also about the people side, right? You've seen China start teaching AI to kids at 7, right? You mentioned the fact that many of the decisions we made or should make to fix some of the talent issue we're facing should have been made 20 years ago, because honestly, it's just going to take a long time, to fix it. You've also talked about the size, right, of China being, effectively 1.4 billion people. When I keep telling people, hey, this is a big deal. We're losing against China, and we're gonna not be able to catch up at some point, right? When you look at the number of people, you look at the size, right? You look at, if you will, the fact that they can just tell people what to do. Whatever, I don't like it. I don't. I'm telling you, not preaching for communism for sure, but the fact is, it's give them an advantage when it comes to telling companies to work with the CCP. When it comes to stealing data, the fact that they steal, countless IP and technology from the United States, right? So they don't have to invest as much. They they get to also build pretty much everything because they're cheaper with the sweatshops and companies like Apple, telling Taiwanese chip companies to put the Chinese label on the chips because they want to be able to ship it to China and build their product just so we can have a new smartphone with no new feature in it every year. So you see all this stuff, right? How
Mhm.
what do we need to do for people to start paying attention to this? What am I missing when I describe, when I tell people, hey, I go on Fox News and I tell people this is a big deal, TikTok, and what am I doing wrong? I must be doing something wrong because I don't feel like I'm doing enough.
I think the most interesting thing here, Nick, is we need to go back into history and kind of look at the Second World War, and what happened around the Manhattan Project, right? Because we got into a situation where failure was not an option, right? So there was a tremendous amount of infrastructure, there was a tremendous amount of electricity to build the bomb, right? So, we have two national laboratories here in New Mexico. We have Los Alamos, we have Sandia, you have Oak Ridge back east that was responsible for making the fission or the fusion that was required to make the bomb, the 235 and 238 uranium that made the bomb and made things go boom in a big way, right? But there was manpower, there was infrastructure, there was raw materials that made all that stuff happen, and we as a nation got together and knew failure was not an option, and we had to defend Old Glory at all costs. So that was at a time. So I think the same, and that was one of the reasons why the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, which is now the Central Intelligence Agency, was stood up. They knew that they had to win this, and they had to use systems thinking, bombing the factories, bombing the ball bearing plants, bombing the steel mills, because they knew that was part of the war effort. And they knew if they would be bombing those places, they absolutely knew that it was going to hinder their ability to either fight or defend themselves through the defense industrial base, to name a few things. So the DIB's a pretty big thing, and we need to think differently about how the electronic DIB is impacting us, looking at some of the ways in which some of the things that we have in the United States can be reconstituted for a wartime effort, and looking at the way in which those things are either propagated through a system or could be reconstituted to do something else. But we have the capacity in the United States. We need our leaders to think differently about how these problems are going to be addressed and how we reinvigorate some of these sectors that have pulled away from the United States. And I believe that's a critically important conversation that needs to be had, not only at your level, but other C-suite levels as well, because that's an important conversation.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, it's time to take some questions from the public. We have so many, but
Awesome.
I'm gonna create some of them. Um, so, and I don't know how much you know about this or not, but if you don't, that's okay. We can move on. But someone was
Okay.
asking, because I mentioned the fact that the supply chain and the dependence we have on China when it comes to medicine, which is pretty mind-boggling, from penicillin to pretty much everything. What could we do, I guess, to address some of this?
I think the biggest thing, Nick, is trying to figure out how we get production back in the United States and how those raw materials to make those medicines can come back stateside, because I believe a lot of it, more than 80% of it, I believe, is overseas. So
Yes.
that's a difficult conversation. So that makes us dependent on other nations for those raw materials and those supplies when bad things start happening to us. So the supply chain is critically important from that perspective, I believe, and bringing some of those things back to the United States, I believe, is critically important.
Yeah, and I think actually for penicillin, I think the last meaningful production in the United States is now gone, and so it's all in China. And so I'm sure that the CCP is laughing at us, wondering how he's so stupid to let that happen. But that's another problem. All right, let's take another question. So obviously we talk about people, right? And we talk about the importance of keeping up, and that's why I created Learn with Nick, right? To make sure that people have a chance to uh, keep up, catch up, both, and invest in themselves. It's so funny how we spend the fortune on cars and whatever else we buy, right? A new Apple smartphone with no new feature, made in a sweatshop, with companies forcing Taiwanese companies to put Chinese labels on it, right? But then we don't find a way to invest in learning. And
Yeah.
so, what do you think people could do, right, when it comes to reinventing themselves or transitioning for maybe a veteran?
Yeah, so there's a lot that can be done. So my journey is kind of unique, Nick, but I think it's important to realize that anybody can do this as long as they devote some time to it and understand how these systems function. And I don't want to say go get a general degree, but you have to have some foundational principle engineering type of activities to drive the way in which that your operations background can come, because everybody's a systems engineer at some level, they just don't know it, and it's the framing of the problem, right? So I see an opportunity for veterans, I see an opportunity for folks who are mid-career who are really interested in this field, but they can ultimately apply it to their domain space. It could be shipping, it could be trade compliance, it could be distribution, supply chain, it could be communications, it could be any one of those things. But I think the important part here is all of these things are foundationally systems based. And when you start looking at the solution from a systems perspective, your ability to discern where some of your inject points for those solutions, I believe, are critically important. So once you start understanding that I can put my systems hat on and go, okay, what experiences do I have? They're going to drive the way in which I either think about the problem, or I can collaborate with somebody who I have maybe more experience on in one area, but that person has experience on in another area. And we can kind of put both of our thinking hats on and go, wow, this is really interesting. But I want to be able to have like a team of teams mentality, kind of like special operations uses, that they're able to tackle any problem that's put forth before them. But everybody's got their own specific level of expertise that they can bring to bear there. So I believe that's important as well.
Yeah, no doubt. So, someone was asking, David was asking about, does the U.S. Maintain any national strategic reserves other than, of course, for petroleum, and how resilient it is and available all those systems. I know we're supposed to do a lot, but we've seen with COVID that many times they were depleted or expired or not usable, and so that's the typical U.S. Government mismanagement debacle.
Yeah, so I believe somewhere in Europe they have a seed storage to reconstitute farming and planting and things of that nature. I think it's in
Yep,
Antarctica. I'm not certain.
yep, it
I
is.
know we have the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I don't know what else is out there. I know there are systems, but there's a reason why some of these things are kept secret, and we have national stockpiles of many things, but those are the ones that I know about. So if you've got insight
Yeah.
into some stuff too, I'm all
Well, the
ears.
DoD has stockpiles of critical things that we need, like bullets and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, but I wouldn't think this would be very helpful in case of natural disaster or I mean, this is stuff we would need in wartime against the
Yeah,
nation. And quite honestly, we've been sending a lot of it to Ukraine, and I'm actually pretty concerned about it because we've been depleting those resources. Sometimes a fourth of the resources are now gone, up to sometimes 80% when it comes to some things that we can talk about. So it's pretty concerning that we would give all that away without having any kind of mechanism to replenish it. That's a big deal.
yeah, and
Um,
our manufacturing base is absolutely critical for that type of effort. So yeah, definitely cause for concern.
yeah, no doubt. So let's take one more question. And like always, after that, I'm going to remind everybody of the next guests and all that good stuff, and then I'll give you the last words, the last parting words,
Okay.
since you're going to be smarter than me, anyways. So let's see. I have too many, but I'm going to have to pick one. Um, so John was talking about DoD, and the fact that effectively the leadership is kind of not held accountable. There's complacency. Of course, we're not held accountable to generate profits. That's for sure. You mentioned that. So how do we measure success? That's actually a pretty small question because
Yeah.
I would argue that if people had the way to measure DoD success, we would probably not meet the expectation of that success, and people would wonder why we spend 800 billion a year in the department and how we spend it. If people knew kind of the waste I've seen and the some of the bureaucracy nonsense, I think people would be like, "Well, that's a problem." So how do you think we should measure return on investment when it comes to DoD?
I think the most interesting thing, and John, thank you for the question. I think it's a really interesting question. I think the resiliency and the ability to bounce back from a catastrophe or a war or something along those lines, when you look at the system, the one thing I've learned about systems architecture, that the more that you try to fight the system, the more the system ultimately fights you back. So it's pretty interesting from that perspective. So I would measure um, the success by the resiliency creative and the lives that you're protecting and saving under the umbrella of the DoD. I don't know how you can necessarily measure that, but I know there's infrastructure that needs to be created. I know the public-private partnerships between bases, as well as the host cities that support the infrastructure for these military bases, I believe, are critically important as well. But looking at the interdependencies between the bases and the cities, I believe, is critically important. And I know there's been a lot of important talks that have gone on within the DoD around that. So I believe that's another point of consideration. So that's going to be my measure of success, the amount of resiliency that's being created within these organizations to collaborate, to partner, to create strategic partnerships within the DoD, within industry, and within the private sector. That was what I would ultimately consider a win for national security and the protection of national security.
Well, I can tell you we were lucky to have you today. This was a very interesting and fun conversation. Despite the rain here and despite your connection issues, this was a trove of great information. So I wanted to thank you again for joining us today. Also wanted to remind everybody that next Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have Rob Slaughter, the co-founder of Defense Unicorns and former director of Platform One and Space Camp and veteran of the United States Air Force. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to blast him with questions. We're going to even take a look at what we did wrong at Platform One, and he's going to be allowed to even share some of the mistakes I made. Although I don't make mistakes, so I don't know what he's going to say, but that might be that's going to be interesting. But it's going to be a lot of fun with Rob next week. It took me forever to convince him, because he was hiding under a rock, being so successful with his launch of his new company. So we're lucky to get him next week. Also wanted to remind everybody to subscribe to the show. If you go to inthenickofTime.tv, you can put your email there. And finally, if you want to learn and invest in yourself, we have this free trial. And of course, 50% off for military civilians and 20% off for everybody else on Learn with Nick. So take a look at it. I love to get your feedback on the content, what we're missing, what we should talk about. We're going to have master classes from great guests that are going to come, 4 or 5 hours, talk about architecture, do deep dive on cyber, zero trust, people that know the stuff and have done it before. We already covered so many great topics. Love to see what we should be thinking about in terms of next content. The next video will be on digital twin. So it's going to be interesting. The one that we just released was on the cloud native access point, zero trust implementation in DoD. So that's also pretty fun. So let us know what we should talk about. Of course, we have a partnership coming with Learn with Nick. It's going to be kind of a merger kind of thing. It's going to be pretty cool if we get it done. I think we will. And that's going to bring hands-on exercises, certifications with things like Linux Foundation, all the way to tons of content. But they have too much content, so we're going to create it, and it's going to be on the Learn with Nick platform, created by me, and making sure that it's not pushing a cloud provider or often what you find in DevSecOps and cloud and digital transformation training is that the people doing the training work for the big companies, and they bring kind of a bias, whether it's on purpose or not. But the fact is, often the content is pushing the secret sauce of Google or Microsoft or Amazon or some of the Kubernetes distributions as well. So we're going to avoid that and create all that out, and we're going to have a very short, sweet, to the point set of content. And so I hope that's going to be helpful to you guys to learn and spend the right amount of time, so you can still spend time with your family and do the stuff you want to do, but still keep up with what's going on in IT. So hopefully that brings value to you. Let us know what you think, and if you want to send us an email at any time, you can do that at info@learnwithnick.com. All right, over to you now, CJ, for the smart parting words.
Nick, I really want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and your audience. These are important issues that we need to address. We need to continue to think about the way in which systems impact our lives. We've got a lot going on. We've got a lot going on in the U.S. and abroad right now, and looking at how these systems impact the way we do business from an interconnected, interdisciplinary, multidimensional systems architecture and infrastructure standpoint, I believe is critically important. The 5 foundational pillars of operations, infrastructure, systems, human capital, and cyber will always be an important thing with regard to enterprise systems. We need to look differently at these problems. We need to have conversations about how these problems are going to drive the way in which we make decisions, and how policies are going to be created around the things that are critically important that impact the things that we do every day. So again, thank you for the opportunity to have this really important conversation on your platform and the ability to share some of these ideas.
Thanks so much for joining us, and everybody stay safe and keep up the good fight so our kids have a fighting chance at winning against China 20 years from now. Bye bye.
Thanks, Nick. Bye-bye.